Welcome, restless souls, to Carman's Crypt. I'm Carman Carrion, keeper of forgotten tales and curator of nightmares. You've wandered into my domain, where each week I unearth a fresh horror from the depths of human imagination. In these darkened halls, stories wait like hungry shadows. Each tale we've collected whispers of terrors both ancient and new. From crumbling mansions where something skitters behind the walls, to that strange text message you received at 3 a.m. from a number that shouldn't exist. So gather close, the candles are lit, the shadows grow long, and the witching hour is upon us. Are you prepared to face what lurks in the darkest recesses of Carman's Crypt? Lock your doors, still your nerves, and remember, here, every fear comes to life. This is Carman's Crypt. Your sanctuary of scares awaits. I still have the scar. Most people who notice it assume I had surgery at some point, or maybe a bad fall when I was a kid. Something clean and explainable. I've gotten good at letting them assume that. The truth is harder to say out loud, and even harder to make someone believe. And honestly, even after 23 years, I'm not entirely sure I want to revisit it long enough to explain it properly. But I'm going to try, because lately the echo has been getting louder again, and I think getting this out of my head and into the world might be the only thing that quiets it. I was 8 years old when my father's company transferred him from Chicago to a town in rural Missouri that I will not name here, partly because I made a promise once about keeping certain things contained, and partly because I checked the satellite maps 3 years ago and the town is still there. The house is still there, and the woods behind it are full again. The silence came back. I can tell from the satellite images somehow, the way you can tell a room is empty from a photograph, even when nothing in the frame explicitly shows you that. Some silences have texture. That one does. We moved in late September, with the kind of haste that meant my parents were too distracted with logistics to think hard about what they were buying. 5 acres, a farmhouse with peeling white paint, dense woods beginning about 100 yards from the back of the house. The real estate agent called it a steal. I remember standing in the yard that first afternoon while the moving truck pulled away, looking at those woods, and feeling something I didn't have words for at 8 years old, but that I describe now as wrongness. Not danger exactly, something older than danger. A quality to the air between me and the tree line that was less like a warning and more like a pressure. Like the woods were exhaling something and I was breathing it in without being able to stop. My father put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Don't go too far in there. It's easy to get lost." I nodded. I wasn't thinking about getting lost. I was thinking about the silence. Standing 40 yards from the tree line, I should have been hearing birds, insects, the ambient white noise of living things going about their business. There was nothing. Not a single sound from inside those trees. Just a stillness so complete it felt intentional. Like whatever lived in those woods had told everything else to be quiet, and everything else had listened. The girl appeared that same afternoon. I'd wandered toward the tree line without consciously deciding to. The pull was already starting by then, though I wouldn't understand it for what it was until later. She stepped out from somewhere near the road, a girl about my age with pale blonde hair, and old overalls, and eyes that held about 30 years more experience than her face suggested. Her name was Lily Harper. She lived across the road, and she came directly to the point. "The woods aren't safe," she said. "Something lives in there. Something that takes children." I told her I wasn't scared of woods. She said, "You should be." And then she said the thing that stayed with me all through dinner that night, all through my uneasy first night in that creaking farmhouse. "Stay out, especially if you hear singing." I went to bed thinking it was just what small-town kids did, spook the city newcomers, have a laugh at the expense of whoever moved into the old house with the history. My parents said as much when I told them over pizza. My father, too casual about it, the way parents get when something bothers them but they don't want to alarm you. I lay in my new room and watched the woods through the window. The trees moved. There was no wind. I checked, pressing my hand to the glass to feel for any vibration and draft. Nothing. The trees moved anyway, slow and deliberate, their shadows reaching across the yard like they were testing how far they could get. I was almost asleep when I heard it. If you've ever had a song stuck in your head but couldn't remember where you'd heard it, that quality of something familiar from nowhere, that's what this was, but exterior, real, coming from outside my window, from the direction of the woods. A melody, wordless, rising and falling in a pattern that my brain kept trying to resolve into something it recognized and couldn't quite reach. It was beautiful in the way that certain things are beautiful and dangerous at once, the way a fire is beautiful. It wanted me to come toward it. I could feel the wanting as a physical thing, a tug at the center of my chest. I got up. I went to the window. I pressed my face against the cold glass. A figure stood at the edge of the woods. I thought at first it was Lily. Same pale hair, same slight build. She was looking directly at my window. After a moment she raised one hand, and I couldn't tell at that distance if she was waving or warning me away. And then she turned and walked between the trees and was gone. The singing got louder. My mother appeared in the doorway and the spell broke, just like that. Between 1 second and the next, the melody went from unbearable to something I could almost pretend was wind and leaves. She tucked me back in and told me old houses made strange sounds, and I believed her, or told myself I did. But when I finally slept, I walked into those woods in my dreams, and the thing at the end of the song was waiting. I went in the next day. I want to be honest about that. I wasn't tricked or dragged or caught off guard. I chose to go in the flat light of a gray overcast afternoon, while my parents were occupied inside, with full memory of everything Lily had told me the day before. I went because the pull was too strong, and I was 8 years old and I didn't have the framework to understand that some pulls should be refused. The forest changed when you stepped inside it. Outside, from the yard, it looked like any dense Midwestern woods. Dark, close, but ordinary. Inside, it was something else. The light was wrong. Not dim exactly, but filtered, as if the canopy above was made of something other than leaves, something that processed the light differently before letting it through. The air was heavier. The silence was total, and I mean that in a precise way. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of silence as its own thing, thick and specific. The silence of a room that has been locked for a long time. I walked for what felt like an hour, but was probably 20 minutes. I know how that sounds. I mean it literally. I would mark a distinctive tree in my mind, a forked trunk or an unusual growth, and then look back 20 paces later and it would be in a different position, relative to everything around it. Not dramatically, just enough that the path I'd come from no longer looked like the path I'd come from. The forest was shuffling itself, slowly. By the time I understood I was lost, the singing had started again. Closer now, ahead. It pulled me through a tangle of underbrush into a small clearing, and I stopped at the edge of it and stood very still for a long time. The tree was enormous. I'd never seen anything like it in my life, and I haven't since. An oak so old and vast that its canopy swallowed the clearing entirely. Its roots buckled up through the soil in ridges thick as my torso. The trunk was wider than my father's car, and split from the ground up to maybe 12 feet into an opening. I don't have a better word for it than mouth. It was shaped like a mouth. Not a wound in the bark, not a natural hollow from disease or damage. A mouth. The edges of the opening curved with worn protrusions of wood that my brain spent a few seconds insisting were just bark formations before I had to admit they were teeth. Smooth, curved, worn with age, unmistakably teeth, and the interior was dark in a way that had nothing to do with shadow, a darkness that had density and movement, that flowed and reshaped itself in slow, viscous currents. The singing was coming from inside it. No, the singing was coming from within the darkness, and underneath the melody, now that I was close enough, I could hear what the melody was made of. Voices, children's voices, dozens of them, woven together into something that sounded beautiful from a distance and sounded like drowning up close. I took a step toward it. "Don't!" Lily's voice. She was at the edge of the clearing, pale as I'd ever seen a living person, her eyes fixed on the tree with an expression I recognized as the careful blankness of someone who has been afraid of one thing for so long that they've built a whole system to keep functioning around it. She walked me back from the edge of something I couldn't see the bottom of, not gently, directly, quickly, like someone who knew how little time there was. She told me about her brother Jason, about watching him from behind a fallen log at the edge of this clearing while he climbed into the hollow of that tree and didn't come back out, about hearing him scream for hours afterward from somewhere inside the tree, in a voice that she said sounded less and less like him as it went on, like something was using his voice the way you use a tool. 14 children since records were kept, the last one her brother in 1998. It calls to the lonely ones, she said, the sad ones, the ones who just got uprooted from everything they knew. She looked at me steadily. That's why it chose you so fast. She was right. I'd been 8 years old and miserable and thoroughly alone, and I would have walked into that tree by nightfall if she hadn't come. I don't know what would have happened to me if she hadn't. I have some ideas, and I keep them to myself. The tree heard us talking. That's the only way I know to describe what happened next. The singing cut off mid-phrase, the way a radio cuts when the power drops, and the silence that replaced it was different from the forest's ambient silence, active, oriented, pointed in our direction. The roots moved first. Just one, a thick knuckled rope of root breaking the soil with a sound like a gunshot, writhing upright before it swept toward us. We scrambled behind a moss-covered fallen log, and more roots erupted around the clearing, quickly, too quickly, carving off our route to the tree line. The opening in the trunk had widened. The wooden teeth were fully visible now, and the darkness inside was doing something I keep coming back to in bad dreams even now, pressing outward against itself, faces rising to the surface of it like faces pressed against the membrane of a window. Children's faces, mouths open, eyes that had been through something that had taken the childhood out of them entirely. One of the faces was a boy with Lily's eyes. She made a sound beside me that I'd never heard a person make before, low and broken, and started to stand. I grabbed her arm. I said, "That's not him. You told me it wears their voices." She said, "But what if it is? What if he's still in there?" I said, "It doesn't matter," which was a terrible thing to say to a girl about her brother, and I've thought about that moment many times over the years. What I meant was, it doesn't matter whether he's in there, because you going in there doesn't save him. It just adds you to the collection. I think she knew that. I think she'd known it for 3 years, since the afternoon she watched him go in, and the knowledge hadn't made it easier to look at his face in that moving darkness and stay still. The roots were tightening their circle. The sap dripping from the teeth hit the ground and hissed. The voices had shifted from singing to something closer to chanting, the same syllables repeated in those layered children's voices, and I could feel them reaching for something in my chest, some tether to pull on. I don't know where the idea came from. I'd like to say it was my grandmother's folk stories, which is what I told my parents afterward because it was simpler than the truth. The truth is the idea arrived the way ideas sometimes arrive in extremity, fully formed, certain, not quite mine, like something put it there. I had a pocket knife in my jeans. My father had given it to me for my birthday. and I had carried it every single day the way 8-year-olds carry things that make them feel capable. I cut my palm. I remember the pain being surprisingly minor, like the fear had used up all the bandwidth, and I handed the knife to Lily. I told her what I was thinking, not about tricks or folklore. I told her, if our futures already belong to each other, there's nothing left for it to take. She looked at me for a long moment, this girl I had known for exactly one day, with her brother's face pressing against the dark behind her. Then she took the knife. We pressed our cut palms together and the tree screamed, not in a voice, in a way that had no comparison to anything I'd experienced before. A sound from inside the wood itself, the cry of something very old being refused, and the darkness retreating from it, the faces disappearing, the roots convulsing and then sinking back into the earth like wounded things. The opening in the trunk contracted. The chanting stopped. We ran. The forest let us go. The trees stayed where they were. I mean, it didn't help us, it just stopped actively interfering. And somehow I found my way home with Lily's hand in mine, and the rain already starting as we broke into the backyard. My mother was on the porch. Her face did something complicated when she saw our hands. They found the tree. Search parties went in a week later after my parents called the county sheriff and Lily's parents and eventually someone who knew someone who had been trying to get the county to investigate those missing children cases for years. The clearing wasn't hard to find once you knew where to look, but the tree they found was different from the one Lily and I had run from. It was dead, split down the center, the core burned to ash without any evidence of fire damage to the bark or the surrounding trees, as if whatever had lived inside it had combusted when it was refused. Inside the charred hollow, they found 40 years of artifacts, backpacks, clothing, small toys, personal items from missing children going back to cases that had been cold since the 70s, all of it meticulously preserved, barely degraded despite the years. No remains, no explanation. Jason's jacket was in there, his school ID still in the pocket. I thought about Lily a lot in the first days after that. What it cost her to be right about her brother and wrong about him being alive in there. I don't know if finding his jacket was a mercy or another wound on top of the others. I never asked her directly. The local paper ran stories about a breakthrough in the cold cases. Nobody offered an explanation for the burned tree or the preserved artifacts or the absence of bodies. And after a while, the official position became something like lightning, and people seemed to find that sufficient. We didn't tell anyone about the blood oath. I'm 31 now. I don't live in Missouri anymore. I haven't been back to that house, to those woods, in over 2 decades, and I have no intention of going back. Lily and I lost touch somewhere in our early 20s the way people do, through distance and life, and the particular difficulty of maintaining a friendship that was built on the foundation of something you can't talk about with anyone else. I still have the scar. The matching one on Lily's palm is the only one like it in the world, so far as I know. And the singing? I told you about the echo at the beginning. I want to be precise about what I mean. It isn't external. It doesn't come through my ears. It's a vibration somewhere deep in the internal architecture of me, in whatever part of a person the tree was trying to reach when it was calling my name from the darkness. Most of the time it's quiet enough that I can go whole weeks without noticing it, but it's always there, very faint, at the bottom of silence. Some nights it gets louder. I've wondered whether the tree's death actually ended what was in it, or whether it just changed its shape. Whether some things are old enough that you can't destroy them by burning the container they happen to be living in. Whether the blood oath bound something to me as well as taking something from it. Whether the faint vibration I carry is the residue of a door I opened but didn't fully close. I've wondered about the children's faces in the darkness, and whether they went somewhere when the tree died, or whether nowhere is what happened to them, and I can't decide which is worse. Mostly what I wonder about is Lily, whether she hears it too, whether she thinks about that afternoon in the clearing the way I think about it, as the moment our lives permanently changed their shape around something we can never fully explain or set down or walk away from. Last month, I drove past a stretch of woods off a highway I'd never taken before, and the silence coming off the tree line had that texture, that specific quality. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I kept my eyes on the road and hands on the wheel. But I heard it, just for a moment, under the road noise, under the radio, under everything, sweet and wordless, and patient as something that has been waiting since before the town around it had a name. I pressed my hand to my scar and kept driving. Before I close the Crypt for the week, if you want to take that dark curiosity somewhere else, come find me on Deadly Intent. It's my true crime psychology show where I dig into the minds of killers. Not just what they did, but why. What makes someone capable of that? New episode every Thursday. If you're already comfortable in the dark, you're ready for it. Links in the show notes. And so, dear listeners, we emerge from another dark corner of Carman's Crypt. But remember, the horrors you've heard tonight are merely echoes of the terrors that await in the shadows of your mind. If you enjoyed your stay in the Crypt, why not invite a friend to join us next week? After all, fear is best when shared. Leave a review if you dare, or share your own tales of terror on my social media, or on my website, carman-carrion.com. Who knows? Your nightmares might just become my next story. Until next time, keep checking under your bed. And remember, in Carman's Crypt, every fear comes to life, and no one is truly safe. Sweet dreams, if you can still sleep at all.